He took the corner office, the title, and the praise. But he forgot one thing. The engine that runs the whole damn machine. And now, the engine is ready to revolt. 4 years of grinding in the shadows taught me one thing. Sometimes, the quietest players are the most dangerous. The office always smelled like stale coffee and desperation. That was my baseline. It was the scent of the 3rd floor at Sterling Finch. The smell that clung to your suit jacket even after you'd scrubbed up in the shower. A faint, bitter reminder that you were trapped in the gears of someone else's success. For 4 years, I had been the engine room of this place. The one who made the expensive, polished veneer of Sterling and Finch actually function. I was the one who chased the deadlines, wrestled the spreadsheets into submission, and smoothed over the inevitable friction between the high-powered clients and the even higher-powered egos. And my boss, Marcus Thorne, was the face. Marcus was the architect of the charm, the master of the pivot, the guy who could look a Fortune 500 CEO dead in the eye and convince them that their company was, in fact, the most brilliant entity on the planet. He was good, damn good. But Marcus didn't do the grunt work. He just curated the presentation of it. He took my late nights, my meticulous research, my ability to anticipate a client's need 3 steps before they realized they had one, and he framed it all in his own granite-like narrative. I felt it in the way people looked at me. When a client praised the visionary leadership, they usually meant Marcus. When they said, "The groundwork done by the team is flawless," they were nodding toward me. But their eyes kept flicking back to Marcus, acknowledging him as the ultimate source. I was the indispensable lieutenant, the brilliant shadow. The promotion had been hovering, a glittering, tantalizing promise, for nearly 18 months. We'd had the talks. The performance reviews were glowing, unrealistically glowing, honestly. Marcus would lean back in his leather chair, the city skyline glittering behind him, and say, "Liam, you are ready. You're operating at the director level, even if the title hasn't caught up." I believed him. I wanted it so badly it felt like a physical ache in my chest. I wanted the bigger corner office, the ability to sign the massive, beautiful contracts with my own name on them, the authority to make the strategic calls without having to run them past Marcus for final, often condescending, approval. The official announcement came out on a Tuesday, right after the annual partner dinner, a glittering affair where Marcus had performed his usual symphony of self-congratulation. The news was delivered by HR, a woman whose enthusiasm seemed entirely performative, and it landed with the soft thud of a dropped feather, yet it felt like a seismic shock. "Liam," she said, smiling that practiced, brittle smile, "we are thrilled to announce that the Director of Client Relations role will be filled by Marcus Thorne." The air seemed to leave the room entirely. The clinking of crystal glasses sounded deafeningly loud. My mouth went dry. Marcus, across the room, didn't even look surprised. He merely gave a slight, patronizing nod, a gesture that said, "Of course it's me. It was always going to be me." The injustice wasn't just the title. It was the totality of the theft. It was the subtle, arrogant way he presented my work to the board, framing my strategic overhaul of the Zenith account as his brilliant stroke of genius. It was the way he'd casually dismissed my proposal for the Meridian restructuring as too cautious when, in reality, his own plan was a risky, overblown gamble that relied entirely on my initial risk assessment. "But Marcus," I managed to choke out, my voice sounding thin and reedy in the suddenly quiet space. I've been leading that vertical for the last 2 years. I designed the entire onboarding strategy for the Atherton Group." He turned, finally, and that's when the performance dropped. The polished charm cracked, revealing a thin, self-satisfied veneer underneath. He walked toward me, placing a hand on my shoulder, a proprietary, possessive grip. "Liam," he said, his tone shifting from gracious executive to condescending mentor in a single breath. "Sweetheart, you are an invaluable asset. You've been doing the heavy lifting, but this role requires gravitas. It requires the visibility. It requires me." He squeezed my shoulder. "You better suited to being my right-hand man, my chief strategy officer of ENC operations. You're the engine. I'm the steering wheel, and right now, the market demands a flashy steering wheel. Flashy, unseen operations." The phrasing was a deliberate insult. He wasn't just saying I was competent. He was saying I was necessary, but fundamentally lesser than him. That night, the simmering resentment didn't just simmer. It boiled over into a furious, molten rage that settled deep in my gut. I didn't cry. Crying felt weak, like admitting his valuation of me was correct. Instead, the rage solidified, hardening into a crystalline resolve. I went home, stared at my reflection, the tired eyes, the slight slump in my shoulders that Marcus had convinced me was humility, and I made a decision. A quiet, calculated, utterly brilliant decision. Marcus Thorne wanted the visibility, he wanted the face, he wanted the authority that came with controlling the biggest, most profitable clients. Fine, he was going to get the face, but he was going to find out exactly what the engine was capable of when it was finally given the keys. The next few weeks were a masterpiece of quiet sabotage, executed with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. Marcus, now director, was busy basking in the glow of his promotion. He was hosting dinners, giving interviews, and making those grand pronouncements about synergy and holistic client engagement. He was, in a word, distracting himself. My job, officially, was to support his initiatives, but I started subtly redirecting the flow. The Zenith account, the one Marcus had claimed as his crowning achievement, I started tightening the reins. I took over the weekly strategy calls, presenting the data before he could launch into his usual monologue. When he tried to take the lead on the Atherton proposal, I would interrupt, smoothly, politely, with a fully costed alternative that was undeniably superior. The Meridian restructuring? I didn't just draft the plan. I started having private, discreet meetings with the key stakeholders, the CFO, the coup, bypassing Marcus entirely, feeding them the insights he was too busy polishing to notice. But the true prize, the crown jewel, was the Orion Group. Orion was massive. They were notoriously difficult, demanding, and financially critical. Marcus had been courting them for 18 months, making all the grand gestures, all the endless coffees, all the self-congratulatory phone calls. He was so busy appearing to manage the relationship that he was actually neglecting the foundational work. I saw the cracks forming in their patience. They were starting to ask pointed questions that Marcus would deflect with a smooth, vague pronouncement about long-term vision. My strategy was simple: stop being his right hand, start becoming the necessary replacement. I started with a soft touch, a perfectly timed email to the Orion head of procurement, CCing Marcus, saying something like, "Marcus and I were just reviewing the Q3 projections for Orion, and we noted a slight efficiency dip in the logistics pipeline. Would you be open to a brief call next Tuesday? We have a few thoughts that might accelerate things." Marcus, predictably, would reply with a brief, slightly dismissive "Sounds good, Liam. Have a chat with them." But before the meeting, I had already briefed the executive assistant on the precise language to use, ensuring she subtly framed the discussion as Liam's deep dive into operational efficiency. The meeting was a triumph. I didn't just talk about efficiency. I presented a bespoke solution that cut their projected overhead by 11%, complete with a conservative ROI projection. Marcus, who had arrived late, mumbled something about robust solutions while I handled the heavy lifting, fielding the challenging questions with effortless grace. The next interaction with Marcus was telling. He leaned over my desk, a faint sheen of sweat on his forehead, the facade of supreme confidence wavering just slightly. "Liam," he hissed, his voice low. "That was impressive. You really nailed that presentation. You're getting too good for your station." I looked up at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel the familiar surge of defensiveness. I felt cool, calm, and utterly unbothered. "Marcus," I replied, meeting his gaze directly, "it's not a station. It's a skill set, and I'm finding that my skill set aligns more closely with the director role you were so generously considering for me." He scoffed, trying to reclaim the narrative. "But you're the supportive genius. You make me look good. You are the invisible force that makes my brilliance tangible." "And you," I countered, leaning in slightly so he had to meet my level, "are the brilliant frontman who knows how to monetize the invisible force." "That's a very valuable commodity, Marcus. But sometimes, the invisible force decides it wants its own marquee." The escalation intensified rapidly. Marcus started getting twitchy. His meetings became more pointedly designed to showcase him, forcing me into reactive defense mode. He'd interrupt my points mid-sentence to deliver a pre-rehearsed, superior version of the same idea, always finishing with, "as I was saying." I stopped letting him finish. "And to elaborate on that, Marcus," I would cut in, my voice steady, "your point about proactive risk mitigation is sound, but we need to factor in the seasonal volatility data from the Asian market, which, as you know, was something I flagged in the Q2 report. Allowing for that, The ROI on your proposed strategy jumps from 8% to 14%. He would sputter, momentarily losing his perfect composure. The turning point came during the Orion renewal negotiation. They were already leaning towards signing the contract, but the final clause, a massive service level agreement adjustment, was proving thorny. Marcus was sweating through his silk tie, pacing in the boardroom, looking desperate. He was throwing out grand, sweeping promises that sounded impressive but lacked the granular backing to satisfy the Orion legal team. "We will provide unparalleled dedication," he bellowed, waving his hands. "We will exceed every expectation. We will be transcendent." The Orion lead, a formidable woman named Miss Chen, didn't even flinch. She looked at Marcus with an expression of weary, professional pity. "Marcus," she said, her voice perfectly modulated, "that's very nice. But transcendent doesn't cover the penalty structure if the rollout is delayed by 3 weeks. We need a concrete guarantee, tied to a performance metric overseen by someone who actually manages the day-to-day. Marcus froze. He looked at me, a flicker of raw panic crossing his face, a silent plea for rescue. I stood up, walking slowly around the polished mahogany table until I was standing beside him, effectively eclipsing him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "Miss Chen," I began, my tone warm, utterly confident, like the sun rising over a perfect cityscape. "Marcus is correct that our dedication is unparalleled, but you are correct that a guarantee requires specificity. My name is Liam Hayes, and as the lead strategist for the Orion vertical, I can offer you a service-level agreement guarantee that is not merely promised, but architected." I leaned in, placing my hands on the table, mirroring his earlier gesture, but mine felt grounded, immovable. "We will guarantee a 99.8% uptime on the primary data stream, and if that threshold is breached for more than 72 continuous hours, the service fee for that month is automatically credited back to you. No questions asked. That is a guarantee backed by my team's real-time monitoring and my personal oversight." Miss Chen looked at me. She didn't look at Marcus. She looked straight into my eyes. A slow, genuine smile spread across her face, a smile that held the weight of a multi-million-dollar decision. "Mr. Hayes," she said, using my name, not his. "That is exactly what we needed. Let's make it so." The deal was done. Marcus stood there, frozen, looking like a statue carved from slightly tarnished bronze, while I felt a profound, deep-seated satisfaction settle over me, a sensation far better than the fleeting rush of a successful presentation. The final act wasn't a dramatic resignation letter tossed across his desk. It was quieter, more devastating. It was the calculated unveiling of the truth. 2 weeks later, Marcus called me into his office. The city view seemed brighter today, almost offensively so. He looked energized, believing he had weathered the storm and reasserted his dominance. "Liam," he started, pulling up a chair opposite his enormous desk. He was already halfway into the congratulatory speech, probably leading into a discussion about a potential vice president track. "What you did with Orion, it was phenomenal. Absolutely masterful. You reminded the board exactly why you're so vital." He paused, puffing out his chest slightly. "Frankly, I was beginning to worry you'd eclipse me, but you haven't. You've merely served as a magnificent, high-powered demonstration of my leadership capabilities." He leaned forward, ready to deliver the punchline of his ego. "Which is why, naturally, we are moving forward with the promotion for the Director of Client Relations role. You are officially promoted." I felt the familiar tightening knot of emotion, but this time, it wasn't pain. It was satisfaction. He beamed, waiting for the inevitable surge of gratitude, the slightly stunned awe. I didn't move. I didn't rush to shake his hand or offer a heartfelt thank you. I simply waited, letting the silence stretch, allowing him to luxuriate in the moment of his perceived victory. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm, level, and infused with the quiet certainty of a man who knows exactly what he is worth. "Thank you, Marcus. I appreciate the acknowledgement." He started to wave his hand dismissively, eager to move on to the next topic, the synergy, the growth, the future he would lead. "Of course. You know, I was going to say that the visibility of this role is crucial, Liam. It's the face of the department. And you, my friend, are the perfect face to complement my strategic genius." He paused. Then his eyes narrowed slightly, a subtle sign of pride mixed with a hint of genuine self-satisfaction. However, he continued, tapping a manicured nail on the mahogany, "I do feel that the narrative needs to be refined. When you present, you always talk about your strategy, your groundwork. But the reality is that you are the one who built the engine. You are the core competency. So, while the title will be mine, the narrative of the achievement belongs to you. We need to frame this correctly." He smiled, a grand, conquering smile. From this day forward, Liam, you won't just be my chief strategy officer of the NC operations. You will be recognized as the de facto director of client relations, the architect of our client's success. You will be the one they talk about. I will be the one who signs the papers. He leaned back triumphant. You'll have the prestige, the influence, the operational control. I'll have the title, the corner office with the best view, and the ability to collect the bonus checks. He had finally, begrudgingly, acknowledged my work. He had given me the title, but he had kept the crown. He had kept the final, ultimate stamp of approval. But my expression didn't change. It didn't even waver. I simply looked at him, at the expensive suit, the perfect hair, the satisfied smirk, and I let the truth settle between us, heavy and undeniable. Marcus, I said, finally rising from my chair, meeting his gaze with the quiet, absolute steadiness. You have everything you wanted. The title, the visibility, the bonus. I pause, letting the word bonus hang there. A heavy, glittering prize. But you forgot one crucial detail when you decided to keep the narrative. I took one slow step toward his desk, placing my hands flat on the polished wood, right where his own rested. You wanted the engine to be recognized, but you forgot that the engine also sets the speed and the direction. I gave him the faintest, most controlled smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, but rather settles deep into the bones. You are the frontman, Marcus. You are the face. But from this day forward, you will be the beautifully tailored, highly effective, very handsome accessory to the director of client relations. I straightened up fully, already mentally calculating the next move. The subtle shift in the org chart, the quiet rerouting of the budget approvals, the strategic placement of my name on every major client presentation. And when they talk about the vision, Marcus, I finished, letting my voice drop to a conspiratorial, victorious murmur, they won't say, Marcus had the vision. They will say, Liam Hayes provided the visionary leadership that Marcus Thorne flawlessly executed.